I'm joined via Zoom by Dr. Finney Coleman, Associate Professor for American Literary Studies at the UNM Department of English. Also with us is Steve Torres of the APD watchdog group APD Forward. Their son, along with his wife Renata, their son Christopher was one of the men shot and killed by APD when he was just 27 years old. And Kate Linus is a mental health activist. She's with us as well. Thank you all for joining us. Kate, let me start with you. And I want to go around the horn here from everybody, get your sense of this. Simple question, why is this issue of reforming APD so important to you? Lynn, I'll start with you.
It's important to me because as a person with bipolar disorder, when I see the violence perpetrated by some officers in APD against persons with mental illness, it just hits me to my core. I can see that could be me, and I feel so sorry for the families that have to endure the loss. Mental illness is a health issue. It is not a police issue. And we need, as much as possible, to take it away from the responsibility of the police department and put it in the hands of professionals who can help these people get the treatment and care that they need and go on with their lives.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Dr. Finney Coleman, same question. Why does this burn in you so deeply?
Well, for me, it's part of a broader set of reforms I think that we need in our country that provides justice and liberty for all. And we are far from that in many respects as a nation. I think the Albuquerque Police Department is much like police departments around the country, often under-resourced, and then often forced to take care of situations or engage in situations that they're not properly trained for, or that it would be better if another social agency were there. I think with it has to be said that we have to be careful when we paint with broad strokes about the individuals who are in any given police department. But this department, like any other department in this country, needs to have a look at what it is supposed to be doing in our communities and what it actually does in our communities.
Mm-hmm. Steve, you and your wife Renata, I mentioned, lost your son by APD at 27 years old, and you're part of APD Forward, certainly, and you're working to be that watchdog on APD's reform efforts as part of the Department of Justice consent decree. Since your son's death, I have to ask, have you seen any significant changes in how APD engages with the community?
The answer is yes and no.
Okay.
In some aspects, we have seen considerable change. For example, let me give you one example. I have seen incredible change and incredible progress with our CIT officers, crisis intervention training officers. I've worked with them. I've dealt with a number of them over the last few years, and I have seen tremendous progress made in their training and how they are trained to handle critical situations with the mentally ill. Mm-hmm. So on the one hand, I've seen tremendous progress there. As working with APD Forward, as you said, part of our job is to monitor the compliance and the progress with the consent decree. And we have seen progress there. We have seen that the police department has met a number of its goals over the course of the years. Of course, that's been under the supervision of the federal judge. And because of the consent decree, I mean, we're not fooling ourselves. Absent that, I don't think it would have happened, but it has happened. On the other hand, there's still a lot of resistance from a lot of the rank and file police officers. And what really upsets me the most is there seems to be a lot of resistance from the middle management officers, the sergeants, not the guys down on the street, but the sergeants. And most of the upper level management, I think, is coming on board or trying to come on board. But there's a big segment of the police department there that is still resistant to any change. They just don't think there's a problem, and they don't think there's any reason to change the way they've done things for years.
Yeah. Dr. Finney Coleman, when you think about this consent decree we're talking about here, it's been a wild ride. the Berry administration seemed to fight this. The Keller administration seems much more embracing and taking a different approach. But, and the monitors, is doing the reports, we're seeing some progress. But as Steve just mentioned, we still score in the 60s in terms of operational measures. And as we know how that works, what's it going to take, frankly, in your view, to get the real change that people want and that the Department of Justice is calling for?
Well, I think that the true answer to that is one that the public isn't going to be happy with. And it's one that takes a much longer period of time than, say, this consent decree is going to allow. We need to change the ethos of our Albuquerque Police Department. That when an officer comes in, that there are a certain set of standards and ideals that they're held to as part of the ethos of that department. And, I think, with the police academy, I know that Commander Byrd at the police academy is working really hard to put together a good, solid curriculum that when our officers are trained, that they understand about equity and inclusion, implicit bias and other things. And so if we have officers like that, leaders like that, who can stick to their guns and not bow to the political pressure from either side to not have those officers properly trained, I think we have an opportunity. But if we have people, our lieutenants and the like, our commanders, if they join in with forces that we might see at the sergeant's level who are resistant to that change, it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible. I think the key is, things change over time. And this is going to be if we're going to have meaningful change in the Albuquerque Police Department, in terms of meeting those measures that you mentioned, those benchmarks, it's going to take a commitment at all levels, which also means that training our existing police officers. I think when given an opportunity to learn more about tactics and strategies that can improve their performance, I see nothing that indicates that those officers aren't willing to participate in that. But the leadership has to make those opportunities available, and then we go from there and see how we can progress. But nothing's going to happen until we get to the ethos undergirding APD.
Accountability is a big topic, of course, when it comes to this. And as we all know, the state took some steps recently getting a handle on this and transparency, meaning passing a bill in that special session that had to do with body cameras, creating a civil rights commission, certainly, at least taking a look at qualified immunity, the ability to get rid of bad cops through lawsuits and things of that. Is this a good start to you? Is what the legislature pulled off in that special session a good start?
I mean, I think that's helpful, particularly for the issues more of systemic racism in the community.
Okay.
I think the mental illness issue is a little bit different because there's issues where the body cameras can actually affect people's right to privacy as well. It's a really slippery slope. When, I was on the subcommittee for the crisis intervention teams with Bernalillo County, we had a lot of back and forth about that with the police officer being part of the CIT. How, do you control that? Is it not subject to IPRA because that person's in crisis and they don't want that video out all over the place of what happened, right? When they're having a suicidal breakdown or something. But I'd like to touch on what was said before about, training in the ethos. There's already been quite a bit of additional training. I think that there is a built-in stigma, and I've lived with it, ever since I've been diagnosed, about persons with mental illness. And there is this presumption of violence, that people like me are violent. Right. And I think that what happened with John Hyde and that unfortunate incident when, he slipped through the cracks for treatment and killed his officers reinforced that here in Albuquerque. Mm-hmm. And the training to crack that is going to be really difficult. And I think we need to keep trying. I think people with mental illnesses need to be very involved in that training so they see us as people. Mm-hmm. But the other part of it is I think we should look at taking as much as possible of these kind of calls away from the police. I don't think they really want to do them. You can look at the model of the Cahoots model in Eugene, Oregon, where they've been doing this for 30 years and their teams do not include police.
Okay.
They handle suicide, calls, conflict resolution, crisis counseling, substance abuse, getting people to hospitals, everything. They've never had a violent incident. Denver just started a new model that's based on Eugene's. They've already had 350 calls that they've handled since June. We should be looking at a different way to handle most of these, I think, because yes, eventually we maybe get everybody to understand what mental illness is, and to be more empathetic and not see them as the other and dangerous. But frankly, I don't see this most of the time as something police should be doing.
Yeah. Steve, do you touch on that if you would? The idea of just having cops come out immediately at the drop. What's your sense of how those changes would look to you otherwise?
Well, as indicated earlier, what happened in the last legislative session, I believe, was a good start. Mm-hmm. But let's not kid ourselves. That's all it was a start. It's a start, and we all know we're on a long road. This process of reforming APD is at least a 10, 15, 20-year project. It's something that's going to last beyond my lifetime, possibly. I hope I get to see the day when our police department is reformed. But it's a start. It's a start, and we have to have faith that hopefully it can continue on. But yes, let me follow up on that. The problem with our mentally ill and their interactions with the police department is oftentimes we wait too long. We wait till the situation becomes critical, till the mentally ill person is now in a state of being dangerous to himself or others. And at that point, it's past the time of calling in the social workers and the doctors. Unfortunately, sometimes the only ones you can call at that point is the police. Mm-hmm. So we need to develop a system where we can get intervention earlier, where families are not ashamed or embarrassed to call and say, hey, I think my son or my daughter or my husband or whatever is starting to slip in, or they're off their meds. They haven't taken their meds for a while now. We need somebody to come and help. And at that point, yes, social workers, doctors, therapists are maybe all that's needed. But if you wait until somebody's threatening to shoot himself or shoot his neighbor, unfortunately, many times the only ones you can call at that point are the police.
Yeah, that's a key distinction. I appreciate you bringing that up, because these things, it's sort of the art of the craft. It is about timing, isn't it? I really very much appreciate you bringing that up. Hey, Dr. Coleman, is there a role for restorative justice in the APD reform?
Well, certainly. I think we, and probably you're probably going to talk about this later. I think when we start having the debates about, defunding the police or abolishing the police, that when we have those conversations, for that part of the conversation where people are talking about defunding the police, I don't think that means that you're abolishing everything that the Albuquerque Police Department does and getting rid of. I understand that there is an argument for that, but there's another argument that says what we do is we pull back the resources that we've given to this department, have a look at what it is that we expect for that department to do, and then reallocate those resources so that it makes them more effective. Right. So I think there is room for restorative justice. Certainly on a case-by-case basis, we need to look at what happens to victims of police, crime or anything that a police officer does that harms another person. Restorative justice is one of those concepts that a lot of people, dismiss without fully understanding what it means. It's sort of like reparations.
Right.
We somehow imagine that it's giving something to someone who doesn't deserve it. I mean, when we look at what happened in South Africa and the healing that took place there, restorative justice meant not just restoring to the person, making them whole, but it was acknowledging what had happened in a way that prevents that from happening again in the future, or tries to prevent it from happening in the future. That part gets lost. And people get hung up on the material aspects of restorative justice when there's as part of our healing as a community. When we've had these kinds of actions take place in our community, we need restorative justice if we're going to move on from these different incidents. We need to reduce the number of incidents, obviously, right?
That's right.
When in the unfortunate moments that we have them, we need that process, need a commitment to it.
Hey, thank you all for joining us. I really appreciate your candid comments.